Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. This is Michael Sanders, and I'm coming to you from the auditorium at Canterbury Woods in Pacific Grove, California. My wonderful recording engineer, Keith Chase, and I are making this recording on Tuesday, 2/22/22. So it would seem to be appropriate to present to you two composers from the early part of the 20th century. One is probably world famous, and one is almost, but not entirely, forgotten. The world famous composer, of course, is Duke Ellington, internationally known band leader, composer, arranger, businessman. The almost unknown composer is Nathaniel Dett. I'll tell a little more about him down the road a little bit. Both people, I think, were influenced by an unlikely source. Antonin Dvorak, great Czech composer, perhaps the greatest of all Czech composers. Dvorak spent 3 years in the United States establishing a music school. And after listening to Native American and what were called at the time a Negro music, he said in an interview, "The future music of this country must be founded upon what are called the Negro melodies. This must be the real foundation of any serious and original school of composition to be developed in the United States." Well, there's an almost forgotten group of talented Negro black composers who followed Dvorak's encouragement and wrote concert music using spirituals, what were called at the time sorrow songs. And of course, another contingent of primarily black, but also people of all backgrounds, composers who used the traditional black music, Negro music, to found first jazz and then all the other forms of popular music, American popular music, that have taken over the world. So what I'd like to do is play some of Duke Ellington's wonderful songs and intersperse among those songs the movements of a suite by Dett called In the Bottoms, probably his best known piano composition. So I will begin with Duke Ellington. He was born Edward Ellington, but he got the nickname Duke quite early because of the elegance of his speech and behavior and the fastidiousness of his dress. In fact, that carried over into all of the big band groups that he had. Everybody looked immaculate in addition to sounding immaculate. So here is a piece by Duke Ellington that was released as Concerto for Cootie. Cootie is the first name of his lead trumpeter at the time, Cootie Williams. Well, you probably don't know the song by that name because when words were later set to it, it became "Do Nothing Till You Hear From Me." So I'd like to play that now. All of the arrangements of Duke Ellington's music are on this program are by Brent Edstrom. Here is "Do Nothing till you come from me, till you hear from me. Thank you. Nathaniel Dett, that's D-E-T-T. Nathaniel Dett was actually born in Canada. I lived there until the age of 11. The small town that he comes from now has a Nathaniel Dett school and a Nathaniel Dett church. In the United States, he ended up at Oberlin College in Ohio. He became the first black graduate of the School of Music, one of the best schools of music in the country right now. And he was enormously impressed at Oberlin when he heard a performance of the Dvorak string quartet and the slow movement. He said, first of all, it made him think of his grandmother who sang him the songs of her childhood. Made him think of that, but he also heard the possibilities of using these materials in the form of concert music, classical music. And he devoted the rest of his life to that. He was a lifelong student of music, composition. Later on in his, I believe in his 30s, he went to Harvard for 2 years, studied there, composition, and with Arthur Foote, and won 2 prizes, a major prize in composition and a major prize in writing. The music that I'm going to share with you is a suite called In the Bottoms. In the Bottoms. Those are the lowlands by the river, especially by the Mississippi River. And in a way, the 5 movements of this suite are a portrait of the black experience in the South, probably pre-Civil War. The first of the movements is a prelude, and it has the title Night. Det wrote short introductions to some of these pieces, so I'd like to share those with you. It says to this one, night. It is nightfall. The heavy chords represent the heavy shadows, and the open fifth, the peculiar hollow effect of the stillness. The syncopated melody which occurs is the tumming of a banjo, which music is, however, only incidental to the gloom. So here is the first movement of the suite In the Bottoms, first movement called Night by Nathaniel Dett. Now I'd like to play a very well-known song by Duke Ellington. It normally ended his concerts. It was his usual closer. This is Satin Doll, written originally for Ellington's longtime mistress, girlfriend, Evie Ellis. Though Ellington wrote the melody, it was Billy Strayhorn, his assistant, who wrote the harmony. And long after both of them were dead, the heirs of Billy Strayhorn sued the estate of Duke Ellington because they felt that he should have got some of the royalties. And in fact, that was the court decision on that. Well, during their lifetimes, Strayhorn and Ellington were very good and close friends, both musically and personally. The Ellington sound was just as much the Strayhorn sound during those years that they worked together. Also, on a personal level, Billy Strayhorn was one of the very few jazz musicians at that time, or perhaps any time, that was openly gay. And he was able to work because Ellington gave him his unquestioning support and friendship. In fact, Ellington described him at one point: Billy Strayhorn was my right arm, my left arm, all the eyes in the back of my head, my brain waves in his head, and his in mine. So here is the song, Satin Doll, written, I guess we have to say, by Ellington and Strayhorn, as most of the songs were, in an arrangement by Brent Edstrom. Thank you. Now, the next song is called His Song. His Song. And Det writes about it. The psychological phenomenon is historic, that the moods of suppressed people have oftenest found their most touching expression in song. An aged Negro will sometimes sit for hours in the quiet of an evening, humming an improvised air whose weird melody seems to strangely satisfy a nameless yearning of the heart. To the extent that we still hear Nathaniel Det's music, it's probably most often in the wonderful settings that he made of spirituals. They were sung by people like Marian Anderson and Paul Robeson. His beautiful, sometimes very simple but powerful harmonizations of these melodies. Now, as far as I know, this is not a spiritual, this tune, but it's set in somewhat the same style as Det did that. So here's the song, his song, from In the Bottoms by Nathaniel Det. The next song I'd like to share with you is Don't Get Around Much Anymore. It was originally released in 1940 as Never No Lament. It didn't make much of an impression until it was released with a vocal part 2 years later, written by Bob Russell, and then it was Don't Get Around Much Anymore. So here's Don't Get Around Much, Duke Ellington. Next is the third and middle movement of In the Bottoms by Nathaniel Dett, the shortest of the 5 pieces. It's called Honey, and the composer explains. He says, literally, honey is a colloquialism, the familiar term of endearment from the South. It may mean much, little, everything, or nothing. The intimation here is one of coquetry. It is after a poem, a Negro love song by Paul Laurence Dunbar. So here is Honey. Thank you. The next song is Sophisticated Lady. When the words were written for it by Mitchell Parrish, Ellington was a little bit surprised but pleased. He said, the words are wonderful, but not entirely fitted to my original conception. Sophisticated Lady was originally an instrumental mood piece. Later on, Mitchell Parrish, who also wrote Stardust and Moonlight Serenade, added the words, and it tells now the story of a sorry tale of a wealthy, love-lost socialite, smoking, drinking, never thinking of tomorrow. But that wasn't Ellington's original conception. His idea of a sophisticated lady was this. He had 3 elementary school teachers, grade school teachers. They taught all winter, he said, and toured Europe in the summer. To me, that spelled sophistication. So Sophisticated Lady, as a title, became the name of a documentary of a woman who had a very distinguished career in England as a jazz singer. Her name is Adelaide Louise Hall. She left the United States for better prospects in England. So Sophisticated Lady is the name of that. Sophisticated Ladies is also the name of a Broadway, I would call it a jukebox musical, a review that has 38 of Duke Ellington's songs in it. And probably by the end of the evening, people would be willing or even eager to hear another 38. So here is Sophisticated Lady by Duke Ellington. Now I'd like to play the fourth movement, the Barcarolle, from In the Bottoms by Nathaniel Dett. He says of it, here it paints the pleasure of a sunshiny morning on the Father of Waters, that is to say, the Mississippi River. We normally think of a barcarolle as being music for gondoliers on the canals of Venice, but here the barcarolle is music for boats along the Mississippi River. So here is the barcarolle with the subtitle Morning by Debs. Thank you very much. One of the challenges, one of the great special qualities of Duke Ellington's songs are that they sound almost like conversation or speech. The rhythm seems like the speaking of a great actor. So this makes a challenge when a song has been written first as an instrumental and then someone needs to fit words to it later on. This song, I'm Beginning to See the Light, has wonderful words by a man named Don George. The peculiarity of this tune is that it begins with the same phrase repeated almost the same 3 times, and then there's something else. And instead of sort of papering over this difficulty, Don George writes tightly rhymed lines so that it's rhymed A-A-A-B. And the theme is light. I'm beginning to see the light, and that theme turns up all the way through the song in a very ingenious way. So here's how the first verse begins. I never cared much for moonlit skies. I never winked back at fireflies. But now that the stars are in your eyes, I'm beginning to see the light. So here is this grand song. I'm beginning to see the light. Now the last movement in the Bottoms suite, it's called Dance, and it has the subtitle Juba, J-U-B-A. Det writes about it. This is probably the most characteristic number of the suite, because it portrays more of the social life of the people. Juba is the stamping on the ground with the foot and following it with 2 staccato pats of the hands in 2/4 time. At least 1/3 of the dancers keep time in this way, while the others dance. Sometimes all will combine together in order to urge on a solo dancer to more frantic and at the same time more fantastic endeavors. The orchestra usually consists of a single fiddler perched high on a box or table, who, forgetful of self in the rather hilarious excitement of the hour, does the impossible in the way of double stopping and bowing. Now, this one piece had quite a success among classical pianists, even a person like Percy Grainger recorded it, and other people also played it. Det cites for this whole suite the words that Beethoven said about his 6th symphony, the Pastoral Symphony. He said, "More an expression than a painting, more an expression than a painting." So here is the Juba dance from In the Bottoms by Nathaniel Dett. Thank you very much, and of course, thank you to Keith Chase for recording this. One final song of Duke Ellington. This was recorded 90 years ago this month. 90 years ago this month. And since then, there have been more than 1,000 recordings of it by people like Thelonious Monk and Stan Getz and Ella Fitzgerald on one side, all the way up to the Kronos Quartet and Luciano Pavarotti on the other side. It was written between sets at Chicago's Lincoln Tavern Roadhouse, and it's based on a saying, a favorite saying of his former star trumpeter, Bubby Miley, who used to say, "If it ain't got that swing, it ain't worth playing." Earlier this month, the Wall Street Journal, which has a weekly section called Masterpiece, which talks about one time it'll be a great Greek statue or a great novel or perhaps a Renaissance painting. Anyway, it chose this song as the masterpiece that it wanted to feature. Quite rightly. So here is the song, "It Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing."